She was living in the car after losing everything in the divorce. The rain hit the car roof as an echo of her loneliness. The reclining seat had turned into a bed, the glove compartment into a storage box, and the rearview mirror reflected only the emptiness that accompanied her. No one noticed her presence, until that night. 3 knocks on the window broke the silence. When she lowered the glass, a stranger emerged from the darkness, holding something unexpected. And in that instant, everything began to change. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. Holly had never been one to complain about life. While she was arranging her few belongings in the back seat of her old car, she tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, not the end. The trunk was already full of cardboard boxes softened by time, all that was left of 20 years of marriage. At least I have a car, she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the keys in her hand. 42 years of life reduced to a reclining seat and a thin blanket. The storm had started inside the house long before the clouds formed in the sky. First came the layoff. The small company where she worked as an administrative assistant had gone bankrupt a few months before the pandemic. Then, the bills piled up. The overdue rent, the power cut off, the health insurance cancelled. And finally, the marriage crumbled like a sandcastle under the high tide. I can't stand this version of you anymore, Preston had said, without looking her in the eyes. Always depressed, always out of money, always silent. It's not fair to me. Fair. The word echoed in her mind as she aimlessly drove through the city, looking for a safe place to park. How could it be fair that after 2 decades together, he simply gave up when she needed him the most? How could it be fair that, with no children, no close relatives, and no means to afford a decent lawyer, she had left with only what could fit in the car? The parking lot of the convenience store on Main Avenue became her makeshift home. It was a strategic location, busy enough not to feel completely vulnerable, but discreet enough that no one noticed she slept there every night. The store's bathroom served her basic needs, and occasionally she managed to get some change to buy a coffee or a sandwich. Holly developed a routine. She woke up early, before the first shift employees arrived. She washed her face and brushed her teeth in the store's bathroom, trying to ignore the curious glances. During the day, she roamed the city looking for work, any work. Sometimes she managed to pick up odd jobs, like washing dishes in a restaurant or cleaning. But it was never enough. Recent experience? They asked in interviews. Higher education? Technical course? References? The questions piled up, building an ever higher wall between her and a normal life. At night, Holly returned to the parking lot, locked the car doors and tried to sleep. On good days she just cried until she fell asleep. On bad days, she looked out the window and wondered if it was worth continuing. The hardest part was not the hunger or the physical discomfort, it was the invisibility. People passed by her as if she were a ghost. Sometimes, Holly wondered if she had indeed vanished, if she still truly existed, or if she was just an echo of who she used to be. On that Tuesday, the rain fell relentlessly since dawn. Holly hadn't even managed to get up to look for work. Her stomach ached from hunger. It had been 2 days since she had eaten anything other than a few stale crackers. The sound of the raindrops against the car roof had something hypnotic, almost comforting, as if nature was crying for her. Curled up under her only blanket, Holly watched the drops running down the windshield, forming small rivers that merged and separated in unpredictable patterns. Like life, she thought. We never know where we'll end up. That's when she heard it. 3 quick and determined knocks on the driver's window. Holly's heart raced. It could be a security guard asking her to leave, or worse, someone with bad intentions. She took a deep breath and sat up, pushing the blanket aside and trying to appear more composed than she actually was. Outside, sheltered by a red umbrella, stood a woman. Brown hair streaked with grey was tied in a loose bun, expression lines around her eyes and a dark green wool coat. She didn't look threatening, but Holly remained alert. With hesitation, she lowered the window slightly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice hoarse from so much time without use. The woman smiled gently, small wrinkles forming around her eyes. "Sorry to bother you. Have you had dinner yet?" The question caught Holly by surprise. It wasn't what she expected to hear. She felt her face heat up with embarrassment. I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, the words coming out dry and defensive. The woman didn't back away. She leaned in a little, as if she wanted to approach without invading Holly's space. "I saw your car here the past few days and, well, I live on the street behind." She pointed to a row of houses beyond the station. "I made soup today. It's just soup, but it's warm. Would you like some?" Holly remained silent, pride struggling against hunger. The woman didn't seem to pity her, just concern. There was something in her eyes that didn't judge. "My name is Irene," the woman continued. "You don't have to answer now." She lifted a styrofoam meal container that Holly hadn't noticed before. "If you want, it's here," she said, placing the container on the hood, along with a spoon wrapped in a napkin. "Good night." Before Holly could respond, Irene had already moved away, walking deliberately slowly, as if she expected to be called back. But Holly didn't call her. She stood still, looking at that meal container on the hood of her car, feeling something strange in her chest, a mix of humiliation and relief. 5 minutes passed before Holly summoned the courage to get out of the car and grab the lunchbox. The rain drenched her hair and clothes in the few seconds she was exposed. Back in the car, she opened the container with trembling hands. The aroma that wafted from the lunchbox broke something inside her. It was a simple soup, vegetables, noodles, a bit of chicken, but the smell of homemade food, made with care, brought back memories of when life made sense. The first spoonful was accompanied by silent tears that mingled with the soup. Holly ate slowly, savouring each spoonful, as if it were the most precious meal she had ever experienced. That night, she slept without the pain of hunger for the first time in weeks. Irene returned the following night, and the next, and the next. Always with something simple: a sandwich, rice with vegetables, a piece of cake. She never directly mentioned Holly's situation, never asked intrusive questions. Sometimes she just left the food and went away. Other times, she stayed a while, sitting on the curb next to the car and telling stories. "My husband, Francis, loved rainy nights," she once said, looking at the cloudy sky. "He used to say it was like the world was being washed to start anew. He died 6 years ago. Lung cancer." Holly, who had started getting out of the car for these conversations, sitting next to Irene on the curb, listened attentively. It was nice to hear someone speak without expecting anything in return. "Do you have children?" Holly asked, her voice still timid, unaccustomed to asking questions. "A son, Mitchell. He lives in another city now. He has his life, visits me from time to time." Irene smiled, looking at the horizon. "And you?" "No, we never did. Preston, my ex-husband. We always put it off. First for money, then to focus on our careers, then it was too late." It was the first time Holly mentioned her past. The words came out slowly, like water from a rusty faucet that finally opens. That night, sitting under the gas station's canopy to shield themselves from the light drizzle, Holly shared her story with a stranger who, somehow, didn't seem so strange anymore. She talked about losing her job, the struggle to find something during the pandemic, the piling bills, the husband who walked out the door without looking back, the lawyer who barely looked at her documents before advising her to accept the proposed settlement. She talked about the shame of sleeping in her car, about the days spent job hunting, and the looks of disdain when she entered establishments just to use the bathroom. Irene listened to everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer easy solutions. When Holly finished, with her voice choked with emotion, Irene simply held her hand, roughened by moisture and hard work. "You are not invisible to me," she said, with such certainty that it made Holly believe, even if just for a moment, In the following weeks, something began to change. It was subtle at first. Holly making more of an effort with her appearance before going out to look for a job, washing her hair more often in the gas station bathroom, asking to use the convenience store phone to make calls to potential employers. One night, after 3 weeks of that strange ritual of dinners and conversations, Irene offered an invitation that seemed simple, but to Holly it represented something immense. "It's cold today," commented Irene while they shared homemade bread with butter. "If you want, my house is 2 blocks away. There's a hot shower. You could take a bath, feel comfortable." Holly hesitated. Accepting meant fully admitting her situation, letting down the last barrier of pretense that she was just going through a rough patch, but the thought of hot water, a private bathroom, being able to properly wash herself. Yes, thank you." Irene's house was simple and cozy. Old furniture, photos on the walls, the smell of lavender in the air. Holly entered as one enters a temple, with reverence and humility. The bath was an almost religious experience, the hot water cascading over her tense shoulders, washing away not just the dirt, but also layers of accumulated despair. Holly cried in the shower, tears mixing with the water running down her face. It was as if she were being baptized, reborn in some way. Upon leaving the bathroom, she found clean clothes that Irene had set aside, a soft t-shirt, sweatpants, thick socks. "They were my son's," explained Irene. "He won't mind." Sitting at the kitchen table with cups of hot tea in their hands, Irene spoke about her own story for the first time. "I almost ended up on the street too, you know, after Francis died," she said, looking into her cup as if she could see the past there. "The hospital bills consumed all our savings. I didn't know how to pay the rent. It was Mitchell who helped me. He was young, he had just gotten his first job. He sold his car, came to live with me for a while until I could get back on my feet." Holly listened, realizing something important. Irene understood her not out of pity, but out of empathy. She knew fear, despair, humiliation. "Is that why you helped me?" asked Holly. "Because someone helped you before?" Irene smiled, a gentle smile but full of certainty. "I help because we are people. And people need each other, that's all. The world is already too difficult for us to pretend we don't see who is by our side." The following days brought small victories. Irene helped Holly find a temporary women's shelter, where she could sleep in a real bed while trying to get back on her feet. She helped her get a new ID card. Holly had lost the old one during a robbery in a public bathroom months before. They spent hours together in public offices, filling out forms, waiting in lines. "Why are you doing all this?" Holly asked once while they were waiting in line to apply for emergency assistance. "And why wouldn't I?" Irene simply replied. It was Irene who encouraged her to call a former colleague, who was now the manager of a restaurant downtown. It was Irene who fixed her hair before the interview, who lent her a more presentable blouse, who held her trembling hands and said, "It's going to be okay." And it was. Not all at once, not like in the movies where everything is resolved in one scene. It was gradual. A part-time job as a kitchen assistant. Exhausting hours, minimum wage, but it was a start. Then a position opened up at the cash register. Holly, always punctual and attentive, was promoted. The money started coming in, little by little. The shelter gave way to a rented room in a modest boarding house. The room gave way, months later, to a small apartment shared with another woman who was also rebuilding her life. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. It had a real bed, a shelf for her few belongings, a window through which natural light came in. Irene was there every step of the way, not as a saviour or benefactor, but as a friend, a constant presence that reminded Holly she wasn't alone. A year after that first rainy night, Holly and Irene sat at a small table in Holly's apartment, sharing a soup, the same recipe from that first packed meal. "I got an interview for an administrative assistant position at a medical clinic," Holly said, a spark of hope in her eyes that were once dull with despair. "The manager liked my resume, said my experience is exactly what they need." Irene smiled, that genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "I knew you would make it. I always knew." Holly remained silent for a moment, contemplating the journey travelled. "It all started with a question," she said finally. "Have you had dinner today?" How can 3 simple words change everything? Irene shrugged, with that serene wisdom she carried. Sometimes all we need is for someone to truly see us, not as a problem, not as a charity case, just as a human being who matters. That night, while the rain gently fell outside, reminding them of where it all began, Holly made a silent promise to herself. She would be that person for someone else someday. She would be the red umbrella in someone's storm, the simple question that changes everything, the outstretched hand when everyone turns their backs. Because in the end, that's what makes us human. The ability to look into another person's eyes and say, with words or actions, "I see you. You are not alone. You matter." And sometimes it starts with a simple question on a rainy night. "Have you had dinner today?" If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.